Billions invested in Ontario's auto sector is always great news for jobs and the economy. This time, with the massive investment announced last week in Windsor to manufacture batteries for electric vehicles, it could be even better news for the environment. With us now on the prospects for this to prompt a major shift towards green automobiles in the province, we welcome, in the nation's capital, Joanna Kyriazis, Clean Transportation Program Manager at Clean Energy Canada and co-chair of the Canadian Battery Task Force. In Drumbo, Ontario, southeast of Waterloo region, Greg Mordu, ArcelorMittal Chair in Advanced Manufacturing Policy and Associate Professor of Engineering at McMaster University. And in Hamilton, Ontario, Brendan Sweeney, Managing Director at the Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing. And we're delighted to have the three of you on our program tonight to check in some very significant developments in the auto sector. And let me just set up our conversation with this. Sheldon, if you wouldn't mind, bring this graphic up and we'll do a bit of background here. With the support of the federal, provincial and municipal governments, LG Energy Solution and the automaker Stellantis are joining forces to build the province's first large-scale electric vehicle battery manufacturing plant. The joint venture will invest more than $5 billion to build a facility in Windsor to manufacture batteries for EVs in Canada. That represents the largest automotive manufacturing investment in the history of the province. The battery facility will employ an estimated 2,500 people and should be operational by the year 2025. Let's get into this. Brendan, how much of a game changer is this?
It's a game changer. It's a big one. We'd been expecting an announcement like this for some time, and were pleasantly surprised when we heard the number, $5 billion. It's a greenfield investment, so it's a brand new plant, so that's exciting. It brings a new stakeholder, a new partner in LG into Canada and into Ontario. Again, the magnitude is just great. It outstrips the next biggest investment that we know of and that was General Motors, 1986, by about $500 million. And it gets us that battery plant. It gets us that first battery plant, which could very well serve as a catalyst for further investment and further prosperity in Ontario.
I don't know if you were intending to be punish here or punny, but when you did say magnitude, I mean, Magna's piggybacking on this too, right?
Yeah, that is as of this morning, Magna, a new sibling plant to their big Formet plant in St. Thomas, new plant going into Chatham, and they're going to be stamping battery enclosures for the Ford F-150 program, which is a huge program. Really exciting. Magna's our largest manufacturer in Ontario and in Canada, and this is the first new Magna plant of this size that they've announced since, I think, 2007. So the good news keeps piling up. So really excited to be involved in this at this point in time.
Very good. Joanna, how do you see it?
I mean, I think the Stellantis and LG Energy battery plant is really a home run for Canada's auto sector and for the Canadian economy writ large. We have been talking about Canada's world-leading battery supply chain potential for a while now, but we've really struggled to turn that potential into reality until the last few weeks. So landing Canada's first battery gigafactory, it not only puts Canada on the EV battery map, it also really sets us up to play a key role in electrifying the North American auto industry.
Well, since you've used the baseball analogy, Greg, let me pursue it. There are solo home runs when you're losing 7-2, and then there are grand slams when you're down by 3 in the bottom of the ninth. Which one's this?
Well, I think this is a grand slam when you're down at the end of the ninth, because there were any number of reasons for this not to land in Canada. Our labor costs are high, our electricity costs are high, and frankly, nobody ever gets fired for making an investment in the location of the big market. And Canada is not the big market, the US is the big market. So kudos to all those involved in the investment attraction process in Windsor and Ontario and the government of Canada for landing this big one and hitting this major home run.
Can you just pursue that a little bit? Because yes, there are lots of players all over the world who wanted this, and we got it. How did we manage to make an argument that clearly, apparently, was superior to all the rest?
Well, I was very surprised. I mean, some of the investment attraction processes that the government of Canada employed and the city of Windsor employed were really outside of what is the norm. And they were telegraphing this and talking about it and talking about these companies for quite some time. And frankly, the rule of investment attraction, as far as my experience tells me, is that the rule is you don't talk about investment attraction. It's like the Fight Club, and they've been talking about this for quite some time, and despite that, Stellantis and LG looked at everything and went ahead and moved forward with it. So I think it's a really positive. As everyone else has said, it's a really positive move forward.
I got to say, all three of you are really on your games today in terms of analogy use. I'm really impressed. This is good. Joanna, pick up the story if you would, because apparently just because we build EVs in this province doesn't mean that Ontarians are flocking to buy them. And in fact, the stats I have seen say we're a little bit behind other jurisdictions when it comes to actually putting our dollars where our feet on the pedal go. If that's not a terrible metaphor, I don't know what is. Anyway, why have we been slow to pick up on the EV purchasing route?
Absolutely. Well, I think Doug Ford's vision for EVs in the province, it's sort of missing half the equation, right? Which is actually helping Ontarians drive electric vehicles. So just because we're building them, that's not necessarily going to translate into higher levels of EV uptake in the province. And it's not going to translate into emission reductions in one of our most polluting sectors, the transportation sector, unless and until the Ford government does more to support Ontario drivers to go electric.
And what would that look like in your view?
Well, let's take a look at leading provinces in Canada, BC and Quebec. Right now, we're really seeing a tale of two Canadas when it comes to EVs. In BC and Quebec, 1 in 10 every new cars is electric. You can access provincial rebates to stack on top of the federal one. There's support to install home charging stations, and automakers are required by law to sell more EVs in those provinces. It's no wonder 80% of Canada's EV sales happen in those two provinces, and automakers send all their EV inventory over there. Ontario, on the other hand, is seeing only 3% of new car sales being electric. That is lower than the national average. It's even lower than the Yukon on a per capita basis. It's because we don't have any of these policies in place. And it's also meaning that Ontario drivers are finding it impossible to find an EV to buy. So I think we've got to look to some of those leading provinces and move forward with some similar policies if we really want to unlock the cost saving and emission reduction benefits that these vehicles provide.
Brendan, let me get you back in here because Joanna has accurately laid out the situation as it exists today. But it's actually worse if you go back a few years, and I'll just put a few things on the record here. When Doug Ford became Premier in 2018, he ended the cap-and-trade system. He ripped out all the charging stations that the previous government had begun to build. He took away all the subsidies for purchasing green cars. That was the EV rebate program. And now he is sort of portraying himself as, the greenest premier around and the guy who's led a revolution of EV in the province of Ontario. There's an old expression, you can't suck and blow at the same time. Do you think they're doing that?
Well, when it comes to some of the consumer incentives, I think they're a zero-sum way to get a few cars on the road today. They don't address the actual problems about the supply, the low supply of EVs in North America. They also don't actually address the problem that EVs cost a lot today. The best way to address this is to invest in manufacturing, to help manufacturers achieve scale and achieve profitability so we can bring the price of EVs down over the long term. I'd also like to point out that these consumer incentives, whether they're federal, whether in British Columbia, whether they're in Quebec, they're all going to imported vehicles. And so I think there's no denying that they can help get a few vehicles on the road in the short term. In the longer term, investing in manufacturing, investing in Ontario manufacturing in order to help companies achieve scale, help companies achieve profitability is the longer term solution to consumer adoption, among other things.
Greg, can I get your take on that? How do you portray yourself as the greenest guy going, given the history of what they did 3.5 years ago?
Well, I think there's a lot. I think we can throw a lot of blame around, but the reality is that Canadians and Ontarians are not buying electric vehicles because Ontarians and Canadians buy vehicles that are in a $35,000 or $40,000 price range, and the vehicles that the manufacturers are offering right now are at the top end of that. They're 55, they're 65, they're $80,000, and people look at that and say, I'm not quite ready yet. I'll wait a little bit and until the industry rounds itself out so that it meets what's happening. And Joanna can talk to this a little bit more, what's happening in Southeast Asia, what's happening in Europe, where there are more lower cost vehicles, electric vehicles that are available. We're not buying electric vehicles because the electric vehicles that are available and are on offer right now in Canada are not what the market really wants right now, or consumers really want right now.
Okay, I take your point on that, but Joanna, let me hammer this point home one more time on the political end of things, because you raised it in the first place. And that is, we're about to go into an election campaign here in the province of Ontario, where the Premier is going to be crowing about what a great environmental/EV record he has, sales up, infrastructure up, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of conveniently ignores what he did for the previous 3 years that he was in power. You're in the environmental movement. How does it look from where you're sitting?
Yeah, I think the fact that Ford has been so reluctant to bring these EV rebates back is not only bad news for Ontario drivers who are missing out on the fuel cost savings that EVs provide, particularly when we're seeing these sky-high gas prices right now. But they're also sending the reluctance is also sending the wrong message to auto and battery makers who are looking to set up shop in the province. I think we need to be focusing on building a domestic market to ensure that there are buyers for the products that those companies are going to be selling and help to justify further investments. Just to go back to Brendan's point, I agree we need to be investing in manufacturing, looking to reach economies of scale, but I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a yes and. We need to focus on the demand side and help consumers afford electric vehicles while they're still seeing higher sticker prices than comparable gas models, which is expected to change in just a few years, as well as supporting manufacturing.
All right, let me pick up on another angle of this story, and that is great news that this plant is coming to southwestern Ontario. 2,500 new jobs. They're going to be good paying jobs, no doubt. Brendan, my question is, one of our problems in Ontario today is people without jobs and jobs without people. Do we have enough people, high-skilled, well-educated, well-trained, who could fill all 2,500 of those jobs?
We do. We have probably almost enough. There will be, we will rely to some extent on immigration to help staff this particular facility and others, and that's a good thing, I think. Do we have enough people? I think we do. We just have to kind of get them engaged with the industry, get them engaged with these companies, make sure that they know about these opportunities. And I think on the other hand, too, LG, Stellantis, other manufacturers generally probably have some work to do to engage those persons, especially persons in their 20s, persons in their 30s, women, new Canadians, groups that manufacturers have historically had a hard time engaging. I think that's the $5.2 billion question, how they're going to staff it up. And I think they're going to have to be a bit innovative. They're going to have to do something a bit different. And we are really excited to learn about what that is going to be. Staffing up a plant with 2,500 people. Staffing up a plant with 25 people these days is tough. 2,500, it's going to require something new and innovative. And they'll have to do it in a way, too, that doesn't suck from other parts of the labor market in Windsor, which is bounded by water on two sides and the United States on another.
Well, this is it. Greg, can you answer the $5.2 billion question? Can we do this? Do we have enough people here?
Yeah, Brendan's right. We've got lots of people here, but do they want to work in manufacturing in general? And do they want to work in automotive manufacturing in particular? The last time, I mean, 10 or 15 years ago when this was done, it was relatively simple. We had a different formula and structure for automotive employment in Canada, and automotive employers, and particularly automotive employers at the original equipment manufacturers, were the alpha employers. They paid more. They had defined pension plans. They had very strong benefit plans. And since then, in order to be competitive with the U.S. South, and more specifically with Mexico, they've started to tear away some of those attributes that made them the alpha employer. They have long grow-in periods. The benefits are ratcheted back until they grow in. The pay is lower in the early phases than it was previously. The defined benefit pension plans have given way to defined contribution plans, and so Canada no longer, or the automotive manufacturers in Canada are no longer the alpha employers, and they've got to move in different directions and look to different labor markets and sectors that are sections of the labor market that they didn't look at 10 years ago, and that's what the LG and Stellantis will be doing as they move forward.
Right, Joanna. Let me take the story in this direction here. I guess part of what you'd like to do if you're planning an economy is to be able to sort of corner every angle of a particular sector. You know, in the case of EVs, in the batteries, we're talking about mining the batteries, making the batteries, figuring out some way when they're finished how to recycle the batteries. Are we closer to sort of controlling all ends of this sector now with the announcement in Windsor?
Well, battery cell manufacturing, it's often referred to as an anchor investment. And I think that's because it can really support development of the upstream parts of the battery supply chain as well as the downstream parts. So, I expect, for instance, this Stellantis battery plant to stimulate some further projects in the upstream mining and refining portion of the supply chain. It helps to de-risk those projects because it's offering a clear downstream buyer for the battery metals and minerals. And then, of course, it'll also be feeding into EV assembly and potentially some battery recycling activities in Canada as well. Ontario is home to one of North America's leaders when it comes to battery recycling Li-Cycle. It's of course impossible to predict what sort of joint ventures or partnerships will form, but I certainly think that landing this gigafactory increases our chances of attracting further investment and seeing further development across the entire battery supply chain.
I got a follow-up for you, Joanna, but first it just occurred to me that, we're using this expression Stellantis all the time, and there are going to be people who perhaps have never heard of Stellantis before. So let me just put on the record here. These are the folks who do Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Citroën, Dodge, Fiat, Jeep, Maserati's in their stable, Opel, Peugeot, Vauxhall. They represent a lot of brands that people will be aware of, even if they don't understand Stellantis by name. But okay, having said that, EVs have got a lot of attention, rightly so, for the fact that they don't burn gas, or many of them don't burn gas. And therefore, they're better for the environment in that way. We have also, though, read stories which suggest that we don't really know how to recycle the batteries properly yet. And if you look at the whole life cycle of a battery, we may not be any further ahead when it comes to environmental protection. Can you weigh in on that?
Sure. So certainly battery electric vehicles on a life cycle basis come out way ahead on emissions compared to gas cars. There are a number of studies showing that. But in terms of how green or clean an EV or battery is, it really depends on where in the world we are manufacturing them. So Canada holds a huge trump card compared to the rest of the West when it comes to the battery supply chain. We've got an abundance of clean electricity to power manufacturing operations. That means that EVs and batteries produced in Canada, or Ontario in particular, have a much lower carbon footprint than those that are produced in a place like Kentucky, for instance. If you combine that clean electricity advantage with our battery recycling capabilities, Canada's really positioned to produce some of the cleanest batteries in the world. And that's one of many reasons why we want to be seeing Canada and Ontario attract more of these global investments.
Greg, do you agree with that?
Well, that's a nice story. And the Canadian automotive industry is full of nice narratives about clean batteries. But at the end of the day, LG, Stellantis, everybody needs to respond to the requirements of their shareholders. And if they can build a marketing plan on the basis of where their batteries come from and the electricity that's used in the form of electricity that's used, they'll do it. Frankly, I don't think that they're particularly interested in that. They're interested in satisfying their shareholders and their stakeholders in more direct manners than that.
Joanna, you apparently have not yet made the sale with Greg that EV batteries are as pristine for the environment when you consider the whole life cycle of the thing, as you suggested in your first answer. You want to go back at him?
Sure. Well, I'll just counter that. I think a growing number of stakeholders and investors are looking for reduction of carbon emissions across the products that these companies are selling, and companies like Tesla or BMW or Britishvolt or Northvolt, they are making public commitments to reduce carbon emissions across their operations, and they're going to be held accountable to external stakeholders and investors, against those targets. So I noted that every single investment we've seen in the past few weeks, General Motors, BASF, and the Stellantis, LG Energy, all mentioned Quebec or Ontario's clean electricity as a big draw.
Brendan, you want to break the tie here?
Oh, I kind of agree with both Greg and Joanna.
That was very diplomatic of you.
I think, though, I'd really like to point out that the life cycle of a battery is going to be a long time, because the materials in that battery are going to be so valuable in 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 years to go back into a new battery. And just like we've seen the price of scrap steel spike at certain points because we use it to make more steel, I think we'll see this with batteries. And so their batteries are not going to end up in landfills. Batteries are going to end up back at battery plants being turned into new batteries. And I think that's something that a number of companies are already planning for and are already out ahead of. And we've even seen Stelco start to make a play into this. Again, that they're probably 5-6 years off actually kind of building up this facility, I think, in Nanticoke. But batteries are not going to end their life in a landfill. They're going to end their life in another car.
Nanticoke
start their life again, I guess.
Right. Well, you anticipated my next question, because Joanna, I did want to go back to you at that. If we're getting into this, whole hog into this EV business, but these huge batteries are going to end up in landfills as opposed to appropriately recycled, we're not going to be that much further ahead, presumably. Are you here tonight to assure people that these batteries are not going to end up in landfills and that there is a better solution out there for them?
I agree with Brendan. I'm not worried that these batteries are going to end up in landfills. We are expecting to see battery material supply crunches globally in the near future. So this is incredibly valuable material. It takes a long time to get a new mine online and to start feeding into the battery supply chain. And so I do think that we'll be relying on recycling batteries at the end of their lives and recovering a lot of that high value material to put it back into the supply chain.
Okay, we've talked about, Greg, the battery plant in southwestern Ontario that is going to be up by 2025. We're also hearing the potential of Stellantis building an assembly plant in Brampton. Have you got any details you can fill us in with that?
Well, I don't have any details. I thought that perhaps when they made the announcement in Windsor last Wednesday that they might talk about what the long-term future for Brampton is, but they didn't, and there's still opportunities to do so. But I think there's some really interesting things that are happening in the automotive industry outside of the EV, because remember, we're at, as Joanna and Brendan have said, we're somewhere between 5 and 10% proliferation of electric vehicles, which means we're somewhere between 90 and 95% proliferation of internal combustion engines. So it's going to take a long time, or quite a number of years and a couple of model cycles to get through to this EV promised land. And in the meantime, we've got tens of thousands of people that make internal combustion engines in vehicles that are made or that end up, like in Alliston, for example, a couple of weeks ago. That announcement in Alliston was huge for the assembly plant there.
This is the Honda plant.
And it's big. The Honda plant. That's a big announcement, because they consistently make 390,000 or 400,000 vehicles a year with about 4,000 people there. Those jobs are steady and consistent, and for them to re-up in Alliston was important. And not just because we've all come to expect in Canada that the Toyotas and Hondas will continue to invest, but Honda has had a history over the last little while of shutting plants down. They've shut a plant down in Turkey last year. They shut a plant down in the UK that they'd had in operation for 35 or 40 years. So the Honda plant and all of these internal combustion engine investments are still very important. They will eventually transition to EVs, but to shut down a plant and then move to EV production the next day takes a while. And the market has to be there. And right now, the market is not quite there yet. So so it's a difficult chore to balance the industry as it has evolved and to plan for the future. And I think that the province and the feds and Windsor, as evidenced through Windsor, have done a fairly adequate job managing that process.
Brendan, I want to follow up with you on this, and you're going to forgive my unparliamentary language here, but I want to get your sense of the fact that the EV battery plant went to Windsor because the federal government put $500 million in subsidies into it. The province did hundreds of millions of subsidies. If you want to take the Alliston Honda example from last week or the week before, once again, we're talking about huge dollars, I think $1.6 billion of federal and provincial subsidies that went into this thing. The question is, do we have to bribe people to come here?
I see these as investments. I don't see them as bribes. I see these as investments. If we're going to be involved in a global industry or a continental industry that involves Mexico and $2 an hour jobs, these investments are necessary by our governments, and the economic benefits associated with the jobs at an assembly plant or at a battery plant alone are just massive. When you add on to that the spin-off benefits, what we call the multiplier benefits, in terms of tax revenues, in terms of consumer spending, in terms of the secure and engaging nature of some of this work, those investments, while they seem, the sticker price looks really big, they pay off really, really quickly in terms of taxes and other monies flowing through our economy. And, frankly, obviously we'd much rather see these jobs in Windsor or in Alliston or anywhere else in Ontario than in a country known for racket unions and paying people $1.50, $2 an hour.
No, I totally get that. But Joanna, we taxpayers are subsidizing each job to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars per job. Are you convinced that this is the right way to go in order to keep these plants here, these jobs here, et cetera?
I really don't see a way around it, to be honest. It's an incredibly competitive global market, and governments around the world are just really aggressively going after these auto sector and battery sector investments. When you've got the EU putting big money on the table, when you've even got the US, the land of the free market, putting $6 billion of its recent infrastructure bill into the battery supply chain, and then Biden's proposing another $50 billion to support the auto sector in transitioning to electric. I don't know how else Canada can compete. We've got a lot of natural advantages to offer, but if other jurisdictions are putting big money on the table, I think we've got to put some on the table as well.
Got to pay to play, eh? Got to pay to play. All right. In our last few minutes here, Joanna, pick up on this angle, if you would. I think it's been pointed out a few times. We've got about 5 to 10% penetration of EVs in the Ontario market so far. I guess climate change has been one of the single most important arguments used by people as suggesting why they should get rid of their gas guzzler, particularly if gas is so high in price, and move to an electric vehicle. That's not the only appeal. That's not the only argument. Joanna, give us another argument you'd make besides climate change as to why people ought to consider EVs.
There are loads of benefits of going electric. So I think cost savings is a big one. EVs are much cheaper to fuel. To charge an average electric vehicle at home in Ontario, it'll cost you about $10 from empty to full. Second, EVs are actually very convenient. You get to skip the trip to the gas station altogether. The vast majority of your charging will happen at home overnight. So, just like you plug in your phone overnight, you can just plug in your car and wake up to a fully charged vehicle. And then EVs are also a lot of fun to drive. Many of the new models that are coming to market are offering, features that we haven't seen before. One example is the Ford F-150 Lightning, which is the electric version of Canada's favorite pickup truck. It's going to have the ability to power campsites, work sites, and even your entire home. So I think that there's a lot of benefits to going electric.
In the interest of full disclosure, I should say I have driven the same Chevy Volt for the last 10 years. It is both a battery-powered car with an internal combustion engine, so there is no, as they say, range anxiety. I used to spend $80 a week on gas. Now I spend $10 a week on electricity, and it's quiet. It's a very quiet, beautiful car. Anyway, I put that on the record. We got about a minute and change left here. Brendan, come on in here and tell me one thing you'd like to see the Ontario government do that it currently is not doing to encourage more EV use.
Fill the assembly plants up.
That was quick.
Get to scale.
Okay.
Get to scale. Get the price down. People will buy them.
Greg, last word to you.
Keep the checkbook open.
A blank check, or what do you want on that check?
Well, we've spent about $600 since 2000 for every vehicle made in Canada. We're going to need to keep the checkbook open if we expect to continue to make vehicles in Canada. So that is our calling card. That is our advantage, and that's the one that we need to deploy.
Gotcha. I want to thank the three of you for coming on to TVO tonight and sharing your wisdom with us. On the top of the screen, Brendan Sweeney, Trillium Network for Advanced Manufacturing. And down there on the bottom left, Greg Mordu, ArcelorMittal, Dofasco Chair in Advanced Manufacturing Policy, McMaster University as well, and Joanna Kyriazis, Clean Transportation Program Manager at Clean Energy Canada. She's the co-chair of the Canadian Battery Task Force. I should ask all of you, quickly, what do you drive, Joanna?
I drive a Subaru Outback.
Is it battery or gas?
It is gas, but I try to not drive it as much as I can. I'd rather walk an hour and a half or ride my bike.
Good. Brendan, what do you drive?
A 2000 UAW Fremont, California built Toyota Tacoma, the best pound per pound truck ever built.
Gas or battery?
It's gas, but it's built at the Tesla plant.
Okay.
22 years ago.
Greg, how about you?
It's a Lexus CT hybrid.
Hybrid. So what does that mean? Goes both?
Yeah, it has a small electric battery and mostly operates on gas.
Okay. I feel very superior to all three of you right now, which would be the only time in the history of this show I have felt that way related to the guests. But there we go. Thanks, you three.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.